thanks very much for inviting me to come and speak to you today. It's the first part of the conference I've attended, but looking at the programme, I see that I'm the first speaker to have the three letters WFD in my title, so I think that's a bit of a dubious honour. Catchment-based approach, WFD, catchment plans, and the third sector involvement. What's it all about? Well, WFD and catchment plans are at the heart of what Rivers Trust movement is all about. Rivers Trust movement, represented here by this little chap in standard blue uniform. The catchment-based approach and the vision for working at a catchment scale is the very reason for Rivers Trust being. It comes from an idea and a belief, really, that river catchments from sea to source to sea, whichever way you want to look at it, provide us with a number of services, ecosystem services, and that these services are not just nice things, nice to haves, but they're essential for our well-being as a society. And these services include things like the provision of clean and fresh water, and that's for a whole range of things, from the obvious things like drinking water that we all rely on, to the river ecosystem health and recreational use. Our catchments also provide us with water regulation for water level management and flood defence. And also space for wildlife, and a vast range of amazing species that exist in this part of the world, in the Broads, through a series of functional habitat networks. But the catchments also provide us with a whole host of other ecosystem services, such as carbon sequestration, and for fundamental importance, provision of food. But the trouble is that in the past, these services have been managed in a very isolated way, in our own little bubbles and siloed thinking. And that's generally led to massive decline in the health of our aquatic ecosystems through a general bias towards the provisioning services such as food and timber. And really, the vision is for a much more integrated catchment management of these services, using a whole range of different tools that we have and we know that work, and a range of different tactics, ranging from regulation through to incentive schemes and community conservation. And this whole view has really been at the heart of the very first Rivers Trust, why the very first Rivers Trust formed down in the southwest, and indeed why every Rivers Trust has pretty much formed since. And I think you'll hear a bit more from Jeff about a recent trust that's formed in the Waveney Valley. Next. Okay, so WFD then. I said I'd talk about WFD. Well, when WFD first came around, I think it's fair to say that we and many other stakeholders interested in the aquatic environment thought this was one of the most important pieces of environmental legislation ever to come out of Europe. The fact that it, to a large extent, judged water quality on biology and ecology within it was a massive step forwards, and it's been a real driver for so much that we've achieved and will aspire to achieve in the next few years and beyond. So if I take you on a little bit of a WFD journey then, us as a third sector organisation when WFD was first on the table, had an article that was particularly appealing to us, and that was Article 14, that stated that member states shall encourage the active involvement of all interested parties in the implementation of this directive. And this to us really meant that community groups and local knowledge bases would inform our member states' plan with a view to the status of our water bodies, what interventions were required, and entailing a programme to deliver those interventions. And I won't dwell too much on the first round of river basin management plans, except to say that unfortunately, like most things in life, you don't always get what you want, and that didn't really happen. And as a consequence, that saw a number of things that occur, the first of which was a number of NGOs that were dissatisfied with the first river basin management plans, making progress towards a judicial review against DEFRA and their implementation, and that was largely led by the Anglian Trust and WWF. Around about the same time, also we were commissioned to carry out a piece of work called the Strategic Evidence and Partnership Project by DEFRA, and that was really to look at the third sector role in gathering evidence and local knowledge base to better inform the classification of WFD water bodies, to help plan a programme of interventions that required and strategic implementation of these, and also a fairly critical appraisal of the current management frameworks for tackling diffuse pollution in the aquatic environment. around about the same time again, and since that point, we've had a number of projects geared up to the third sector for delivering WFD in a much bigger way, one of which is our own River Improvement Fund that DEFRA have funded for us to deliver, and that's seen over £6 million worth of projects spent directly by Rivers Trust for river improvement schemes in their own local patches, ranging from habitat improvements to eel passes and weir removals indeed. And the success of that scheme led to a wider rollout of a much wider third sector programme, which was called the Catchment Restoration Fund, that was open to all third sector charitable organisations, and that's seen over £20 million being spent, and that's currently ongoing with projects in the middle of their delivery phases. We've also, in that time, we've seen DEFRA pilot the catchment-based approach in a number of catchments, and we've recently seen the catchment plans produced as a result of those. And we've definitely seen a massive shift towards partnership delivery from the Environment Agency and other statutory bodies. And a really good example of that is a national MOU that's recently been signed between the Environment Agency and ourselves, the Rivers Trust, really aligning our strategic aims for delivering WFD, eel regulations, climate change, and crucially for the third sector, it includes a data and information sharing agreement which enables us to access the data for all stakeholders to really deliver the improvements that they need and target things appropriately. And at the same time, it's also seen a massive growth in our own Rivers Trust movement, from a few trusts in the beginning 20 years ago to almost full coverage across the UK. We also have Rivers Trust in Northern Ireland and the sister organisation that's in Scotland. Okay, so moving a bit more to the present time now then. Well, we currently recently seen DEFRA launch the catchment-based approach, and this is something that we've really been keen to see happen for a number of years now. This is really at the heart of how we like to see things going, with local communities taking a much greater ownership for delivering WFD and other drivers within their own local catchment. And aligned with that, we've seen ourselves and other NGOs or the third sector response to that showing a very united front that this is indeed the way we'd like to see greater implementation of catchment-based delivery into the Water Framework Directive. And for those of you that may be less familiar with it, the process essentially sees the country carved up into a number of management catchments that align with the catchment abstraction management areas of the Environment Agency. And these groups will form catchment partnerships for all stakeholders that are interested in the aquatic environment and delivering wider catchment benefits. And these will have formal recognition in river basin management plans, and that is a massive step forwards from where we were at the last round of river basin management plans. So how we would really like these things to work then is this much more, is there a pointer on this? A much more local community knowledge base developed that talks with the statutory evidence base in the middle here, mixed up and use linked data, and this can all provide into the national evidence base that gets reported up to Europe and really takes into account local knowledge, local aspirations, and so forth. And to help with the delivery of that and underpin all of this, we, along with a number of partners from academia and elsewhere, are developing a number of tools and online devices for these catchment partnerships to be able to deliver these aspirations. They include sort of risk mapping modelling to target areas in a catchment that are most at risk from diffuse pollution, for example, online barrier prioritisation databases and GIS portals, habitat mapping creation opportunities, and adaptive modelling techniques here, one with the UEA, which is an incredibly useful tool where you actually allow, this is for agriculture, for them to sit down and input the data, the evidence into this modelling technique that outputs, and they can really believe and feel ownership in the data and implement changes that make real differences on the ground. Another sort of technique that we've been sort of pioneering and developing is the mapping of ecosystem services, and I'll just run through a quick series of maps for you here, but they all follow a very similar vein, and this relates to the ecosystem services that I loosely talked about in one of my opening slides. And on this map, of catchments down in the southwest that highlights where in a river catchment, or indeed the whole land catchment, you receive the most benefits of particular ecosystem services. So in this case, this is the clean and fresh water for the ecological health of a river and the areas in which you deliver that benefit currently. And you can do this with all of the ecosystem services. So this is the area in the catchment that you receive the clean and fresh water, the important areas for providing clean and fresh water for drinking purposes. Water regulation for flood risk management. Climate regulation for greenhouse gas sequestration and air quality. Recreation and tourism is a very important one, areas that are important for public access and amenities. Provision of habitats, so AONBs and things would fit into this category, and you get stakeholders to build these maps with you to make sure everybody buys into this approach. And then you lay all of those on top of each other, and you can look to see where in your catchments you deliver the most multiple ecosystem benefits, the areas with the high provision of multiple ecosystem services. And then you can compare this map, for example, with the areas in the catchment that are currently producing food at high intensities. And by comparing those two maps, you can identify those areas in the catchment where the biggest conflicts occur between those really important areas delivering a number of multiple ecosystem services and where intense agriculture occurs. And you can use this as an engagement tool, but also to prioritise your delivery of action for interventions. The flip side, of course, is that you can generate a map which shows areas in the catchment where you can produce food fairly intensively without having the same impact on your ecosystem services. And this is a sort of standard tool that we're developing, and hopefully will be available to all partnerships as we move forward with the catchment-based approach. Okay, so we've moved on a great deal since the first round of river basin management plans, and the Holy Grail may actually be nearing closer, and it could actually be within our grasp. But this will require the buy-in from all stakeholders to make this work. And if this is to work, and this is the Holy Grail, and we want to peer in and see what it might look like in reality, rather than witter onto you for any longer, I thought I would show you a video by one of our Rivers Trust down in West Country, which I think sums up the vision quite nicely. Hopefully this will work. Sound?
All these people need a lot of things from the planet, but what the land can provide is limited. We live in a world where there are more and more people all living in a limited amount of space. The challenge we face is that all these people need a lot of things from the planet, but what the land can provide is limited. So how do we know if we're getting all the things we need? It helps if we look at the benefits the land provides as services, such as food, energy, drinking water, flood protection, or just a place to play. How do we balance these services wisely to meet society's demands? With the right information, we can make the right decision for any area of land, such as, is it suitable for food or energy? Does it conflict with other services? Or do we get several services from the same area? But how do we find out what the land is capable of providing? First, we need information about the different services we get from the land. However, some of this information may not be available or may be incomplete. Some might be out of date or have the wrong resolution, or represent subjective views which are hard to evaluate. To overcome this, we need to review the information and what it means to our society. We must divide the land up into manageable areas, such as river catchments. Rivers drain the land and are good indicators of how well we're managing these services. If we get the right balance, we can maximise the amount we get from the land and still end up with a healthy river. Thanks to the help of the landowners and communities who live and work in our river catchments, the process of collecting information has already begun. By mapping these services, we can show what the land is suitable for, where land can provide multiple benefits and where there may be conflicting demands. We can use this information to make better decisions about funding and managing our shared resources sustainably. When we do this, the environment, society, and the economy will all benefit.
Thank you very much for listening.